The dry casks, in addition, are not designed to withstand terrorist attack, for one thing. There are various weapon systems that can breach the dry casks and release the contents. I wanted to put this slide up because it's from a Department of Energy report to the President and the Congress on the need for a second repository. It came out in the closing days of the Bush administration as an effort to boost support for the Yucca Mountain dump proposal, which Obama had already made clear before taking the oath was over with. And what it shows is that the Department of Energy back in the mid-1980s, that blue color there is the 17 states previously considered for a second repository program. What the Department of Energy was threatening to do was to reopen the site search. This is not underway. This was a threat made by the Bush Department of Energy before it left office. But I wanted to point out that as nuclear waste piles up around the country, a magical date is about to happen in the spring of 2010. There will be 63,000 metric tons of high-level radioactive waste at commercial reactors in the country. That is the legislative limit under law for the Yucca Mountain repository to accept. So even if Yucca were already open right now, any waste generated at Vermont Yankee after this spring would have been accessed to Yucca Mountain. There would have needed to be a second repository open to take that excess waste from Vermont Yankee. That's an academic argument because Yucca Mountain's not happening. The U.S. General Accounting Office of Congress put out a report late last year, and I wanted to mention that at the end of that report there was a cost for on-site storage up to the range of 2,000 years of on-site storage. And the cost figure they put on that nationwide program is $360 billion. So I just wanted to point out that GAO is looking at 2,000 years of on-site storage of these wastes. The Nuclear Waste Confidence Decision is an NRC policy, first promulgated in 1984, and they said that by the year 2009, at the latest, there would be an operating repository for high-level radioactive waste. By 1990, 6 years later, it was clear that wasn't going to be the case. They put the date out to 2025. They have now proposed to simply do away with the date and express confidence that 60 years post-license termination at any reactor in the country, there will be an operating repository. So we call it a confidence game, a con game. It's the illusion of a solution to a problem that we don't have a solution for, and we need to stop making this waste. We have alternatives like efficiency and renewables that don't involve the generation of radioactive waste or tritium. I put this up because Vermont Yankee and Entergy in general have chosen the Holtec dry cask system as its dry cask of choice. Ironically, the government of Ukraine has also chosen the Holtec dry cask system to store the Chernobyl high-level radioactive waste and all of the country's high-level radioactive waste in the Chernobyl region. So Chernobyl is becoming more of a nuclear sacrifice zone than it already was. And this Russian doll I put up there, the Matrushka doll, because in reality, as the Holtec casks deteriorate over time, in decades and centuries to come, they will need to be repackaged. Whether or not the waste can be gotten out safely to put into a new package is another question. So we may have to revert to a Russian doll approach and put another package over the failed old package as time goes on. And the General Accounting Office report acknowledges this reality. So I just wanted to touch quickly on some track records of other Entergy nuclear power plants across the country, whether or not they're being good neighbors. In Grand Gulf Nuclear Power Plant in Port Gibson, Mississippi, Claiborne County is 84% African American, 34% below the poverty line, Depression-era unemployment before the current recession. And one thing that went down under pressure from Entergy was the rate shock to all of western Mississippi because of the cost overruns of the construction of this plant was so severe that they got an exception to Mississippi law. The county of Claiborne was supposed to enjoy all of the tax revenues from this facility, but to lessen the rate shock on the rest of western Mississippi, scores of counties got to share 75% of the tax revenues, leaving only 25% for Claiborne County. What that meant was all of the promises from Entergy, new fire stations, new hospitals, new police stations, went by the wayside. The county, which is as big as Washington, D.C. in size, has a single fire station, has a single night patrolman on the police force, and has a hospital that can't run 24/7, the emergency room, because it lacks the resources. And this photograph on the right is pretty startling. This is one of the emergency evacuation routes. The two people are standing on the road that is washed out, and the county can't afford to repair the road. This is one of the emergency evacuation routes at Grand Gulf Nuclear Power Plant.
Betty? Yeah, I've got a couple questions I've been trying to get in. I'm still trying to figure out, you've talked about that these pipes are uncontrolled, unmonitored, uninspected, etc. If that's the case, how did they ever find that it was leaking tritium? If nobody knew it was there, nobody was watching it, nobody was monitoring it.
Well, when I talk about control, I mean control of the pipes. So the test well that was put in 30 feet from the Connecticut River, that's where the tritium contamination at Vermont was first revealed. And I only learned about it a week and a half ago. I don't know if others knew about it earlier. But
so there is monitoring.
But it's after the release. So it's uncontrolled in the sense that it's already in the groundwater. Those pipes are not supposed to be leaking. There are permits for discharging tritium into the Connecticut River directly. Those releases are monitored and controlled in a sense. We have issue with them because of the health effects of tritium in the river. The difference is these leaks, apparently, the source of the leaks is yet to be determined. But these are uncontrolled and unmonitored releases happening into groundwater.
Two other quick questions. You talked about the children with the brain cancer. Were there medical tests done to determine that it's tritium that caused that rather than other?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Dr. Rosalie Patel, who I mentioned earlier from Canada, who's an expert on tritium health impacts, points out in her work that the health studies often go undone. There simply are not health studies done. So you're right, we cannot definitively point to tritium releases from the Dresden health plant in Illinois or Rayburn as the cause. But the precautionary measure, which is gaining ground in our society, is that if there is a potential for danger, that it should be prevented if possible. And so these uncontrolled releases are very problematic.
Just my last question, Tony. You've cited a variety of scientific studies or scientists or doctors that take this position. Are there a number of other scientists, doctors, etc., that take the opposite position? And I'm sorry, but I don't know you. I'm new to this committee. Are you a scientist, or you're giving us this data as facts, and I don't know who you are.
Right. Well, I do rely on people like Dr. Makashani and Dr. Patel, our board member Kate Rye, who have the scientific credentials, who are PhDs in these areas. I do not. But I refer to myself as a community organizer, and that was even before Barack Obama got in trouble for that, the Republican National Convention. That's what I do, is I try to educate the community, work with the community to address these risks.
So you take the data that the scientists and doctors do.
Yep.
But are there an equal number of scientists and doctors that take the opposing position?
No, the issue, and I'd be very happy to provide this information to the full committee, all of the analyses by Dr. Patel, Dr. Fairley, Dr. Makashani are critiquing this, the faulty assumptions that currently are in place in health regulations. So your question is, are there an equal number? Well, unfortunately, the NRC, which has a lot of responsibility for protecting health, is washing its hands of its responsibility at this point. It sees no nexus between health and tritium leaks. Well, we have the data, and so do the doctors I mentioned, to challenge that position. And we'd be happy to share that with you.